Hey guys, Deanna here with Homestead and Chill, and I thought I would show you guys how we harvest worm castings from a really simple, basic worm bin like this. So we already did a video, if you missed it, about how to set up a really basic worm compost bin just using a simple plastic tote like this. This actually isn't the one we're currently using though, and not the one that you saw in that tutorial. We set up a new one because this is our old bin and it's funky and it has a big old crack in it, and so it was time for a new bin, and we downsized just a little bit as well. But this bin actually still has quite a bit of worm castings and some worms in it, and we wanted to get them out, so I figured it was a perfect opportunity to show you how we harvest from this type of worm bin. It's a little different than some of those like stackable fancier worm bins that have different trays and layers for you, because obviously it's just one big container, so you have to sort of trick the worms in order to try to harvest as much of the worm castings as you can without bringing all your worms with you. And so I should mention too, if you are just starting with a new worm bin, you might not be ready to harvest right away. It might take a few months for your population of worms to really like break down more of their bedding, break down their food, and actually start developing finished worm castings. And don't worry, I will rearrange the camera and everything and show you close-ups of all of this. But once it turns into nice brown fluffy worm castings in a lot of the bed, then that's time where you can start to think about harvesting some of it to use. So to do that, to prepare to do that, just a week or two before you want to start harvesting, you have to feed the worms onto one side of the bin. So if you normally have your the bedding and food and everything all piled up, also spread it out a little bit thinner so that there's an area that you'll be able to harvest from, and then feed them and bury the food in one different area, kind of in the far opposite corner, for a couple of weeks. All the worms are going to migrate to that side. Okay, so then once you get most of the worms to migrate to the one side of the bin, then it's a lot easier to harvest the finished castings from the other side of the bin. But keep in mind that it's not a huge deal if a few of the worms end up coming along with you with your finished castings, especially if you're just adding it straight to raised beds. We welcome worms in our raised beds, and really it's sort of inevitable as well because their cocoons or their eggs come along with their castings a lot of the times and end up in your beds as well. So those are going to hatch and develop little baby worms in your raised beds, which are going to continue to aerate and break down organic matter and nourish your soil right in the beds. So we'll try to leave as much behind as possible, but that's okay if some get through. So to do that, there's a couple different methods, and I'll show you up close as well. But a couple years ago, Erin made this screen, and it was actually for a different project, but it worked really perfectly for screening our worm castings. So this is just hardware cloth. I think it's, I can't remember if this is the 1/4 inch or the 1/2 inch size, but it's hardware cloth on a random scrap wood frame, and then it just has some wide head cabinet screws to keep it on here, and it just happens to fit really perfectly over a simple tote like this. And so that way we can just put the screen on top of a tote, and then we're going to scoop some worm castings onto here and then sift it through. And the screen accomplishes a couple things. A, it keeps behind large chunks of food that haven't broken down yet. Any bedding like paper and things that need to go back into the worm bin, you can sift them out and put them back, and it should capture a bit of the worms. They might fit through some of the smaller ones through this size screen, but you'll probably get the most of them. So you can kind of sift it through. It catches all the big matter that needs to go back into the bin for further decomposition, but it also helps kind of break down your worm castings into a nice fluffier, more fine texture, because it can get a little bit clumpy in there sometimes. So then we end up with a really nice, ready to spread, ready to use screened worm castings this way. So that one other way that you can do it if you don't have a screen, and what we actually did for years before, so don't worry about setting up something fancy, not that this is fancy, but don't worry about setting up anything special if you don't have the ability to do it at this moment. We used to just feed them on the one side and then just scoop from the other side, you know, with a bucket and a little trowel, and we'd scoop through and we'd collect the worm castings, and then if there were big chunks, I just picked through by hand, and I just grabbed the worms and I grabbed the, you know, pieces of paper and everything and just threw it right back in there. So two simple ways. The biggest thing is just getting them to go kind of away from the area that you want to harvest from. So I'll go ahead and do some harvesting for you now. Okay, so here is the inside of that worm bin. We fed them over into this corner, so let's actually see. Maybe I can see if we can see some worms here. Oh, yep. So Erin gave them some apple and stuff. I don't see a ton of them in here because, again, we actually took a bit of this population out already and put it in our other bin. So I'm not seeing a ton. Oh, there's a little cluster of them. There they are. They're down a little deeper. I don't want to disturb them all right now. But there are some of our worms. Hey, buddies. So we'll get that buried back up. So that was kind of the little pile that we made so that we could harvest from this side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna scoop a bunch into this bucket and then we'll bring it over onto the screen to screen it. So getting through, and you can see how fine, nice, and fluffy the worm castings are, ready to be used. And I'm not seeing a lot of worms in here, so they've migrated the way that they're supposed to. We're just gonna scoop out a good amount. Yep, not seeing many worms at all right now. And how much you harvest depends on the project that you're doing, obviously. So if you are really heavily amending a bed, you might want to take a ton. If you're just, you know, I mean, and by a ton, I mean, you know, however much you can spare from your bin. But then if you're just, say, planting a tree or something like that, or a plant, a single thing, you know, you might just want a nice little handful. So you can periodically, you don't have to, it's a big pit of some sort, you don't have to harvest huge amounts like this and screen huge amounts every time you need to use it. We're getting rid of a good amount because we're actually going to make aerated compost tea, which is a whole nother tutorial and video that I'm going to prepare for you guys. So we are harvesting a bit, and again, getting rid of this tote. Normally I probably wouldn't take even quite this much at a time. I would just take a few scoops for whatever little project we're doing. So it just depends on what you need. A little bit goes a long way though with worm castings. So we've got the screen set up with a tote below so we can catch this stuff. And I'm just going to do a little bit at a time, pour some castings on here, and just kind of sift it through. And again, this stuff's already pretty broken down. We haven't been feeding this bed for that long. You can wear gloves if you want to. I'm not going to worry about it too much. And just work that back and forth. There are some sharp pits. I think Aaron put some stone fruit pits or something in here. All right, so there's some big chunks. Some of this might even be like barky stuff from wood from the yard. I'm not really sure. So I don't even see any worms right now. So we did a pretty good job about tricking them and getting them to go. So I'm just going to push that kind of out of the side. Oh, there's one worm. One little guy made it through. I'm going to toss him back over there. Okay, and do some more. Work that through. Sorry, worm. I do feel bad when they get kind of stuck on there, so I'll just usually shove them through if they're stuck. Okay, a couple big chunks. Apparently worms don't like cranberries. We had a whole thing of some random plastic crap in there. We had a whole thing of cranberries in the freezer still from the holidays that needed to go, so we put it in here, and they have not eaten them. Okay, so there are the chunks. I'm going to leave them be. I'm in this. And we'll just push that aside and check that out. So this are all of our finished screen castings. So it's as simple as that. Now we can take this amazing black gold natural fertilizer, broken down organic matter, really high in beneficial microbes. It increases soil moisture retention and drainage. Just a great, great natural fertilizer. So again, we're going to make some compost tea with this, so stay tuned in to that video, and that'll be soon to come. But you can also just add this straight to your garden beds. You can even use it in potted plants. There's a lot of different things that you can do with worm castings. I'm going to write a blog post all about it as well, so that's what this video is kind of to go with. I should have mentioned that from the beginning. So for more details, go ahead and tune into the blog post on Homestead and Chill. Thanks, guys.